The communication chamber of the Galactic Council fell silent as the ancient message played for the third time. Static filled the air, broken by words that made even the bravest representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. Found them in Sector 7, the humans, by the void there. The voice crackled with interference, but the fear was unmistakable. Never engage alone. Warn all species. They don't fight like us. They don't think like us. Ambassador HFY of the Trilaxian Federation leaned back in his crystalline chair, his forearms crossed in dismissal. The blue-skinned diplomat had seen countless archaeological discoveries in his 200 years of service. This was just another dusty relic from a dead civilization. Honorable council members, HFY's voice carried the authority of someone who had negotiated peace between warring systems. We waste precious time on ghost stories. The Corvathian Empire vanished 10,000 years ago. Their final transmissions mean nothing to us today. Dr. Kethmore, the Council's chief xenobiologist, studied the data flowing across his holographic display. His tentacled head swayed as he absorbed the information. Unlike the politicians around the table, Kethmore dealt in facts, not opinions. What he saw troubled him deeply. Ambassador HFY speaks too quickly, Kethmore said, his voice carrying the careful tone of a scientist. This transmission was not sent during the Empire's decline. The timestamp places it exactly 72 hours before their final communication to any known system. The chamber grew quiet. Every species in the galaxy knew the story of the Corvathians. They had been the most powerful civilization ever recorded. Their ships could destroy planets. Their armies had conquered entire star systems in mere days. They had ruled half the galaxy with absolute authority. Then in less than a week they had simply vanished. No one knew what happened to them. Their worlds were found empty but undamaged. Their massive fleets had disappeared without sending distress signals. It was as if the entire civilization had decided to stop existing. Counselor Nexta, whose species had once been enslaved by the Corvathians, spoke from her position at the far end of the chamber. Her voice carried the wisdom of her 800 years. The Corvathians feared nothing, she said. They conquered our world in 3 days. They turned our strongest warriors into decorations for their walls. If something made them afraid enough to send this warning. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. HFY waved one of his hands dismissively. Fear makes people imagine threats that don't exist. The Corvathians probably destroyed themselves with their own weapons. They were always too aggressive for their own good. Dr. Kethmore touched his datapad, bringing up more information. I have spent the last month analyzing every fragment of this transmission. The voice patterns show extreme stress but also certainty. This was not someone imagining threats. This was someone who had seen something real. The holographic display changed, showing a star map. A red circle highlighted a small section of space on the galaxy's outer rim. Sector 7, Kethmore continued. According to our records, it contains 12 star systems. Most are empty space. 3 have planets that could support life, but our long-range scans show no advanced civilizations. The most interesting system has a small yellow star with several planets. The 3rd planet shows signs of primitive life. Counselor Vexran of the hegemony leaned forward. His species valued strength, above all else, and the mystery of the Corvathians had always bothered him. What kind of primitive life? He asked. Basic technology. They have recently discovered nuclear power. They show signs of radio communication. From what we can tell, they are still confined to their home planet. Kethmore paused. They call themselves humans. Ambassador HFY laughed, the sound echoing off the chamber walls. So the mighty Corvathians were destroyed by primitives who barely know how to split atoms. This is exactly what I mean about wasting time on ghost stories. But Dr. Kethmore was not finished. He touched his datapad again, and the display showed detailed scans of the 3rd planet. There is something unusual about these humans, he said. Their planet shows evidence of massive wars. Nuclear weapons have been used. Their cities have been destroyed and rebuilt multiple times. Yet they continue to exist. They continue to fight. Many species go through violent periods, HFY said. It's part of growing up. Most species have 1 or 2 major conflicts. Before they learned peace, Kethmore replied. These humans have had dozens of major wars in just the last few hundred years. They fight constantly, but they never seem to learn to stop fighting. Counselor Nexta studied the data with growing interest. Show us their military capabilities. The display changed again. This time it showed images of human weapons, human soldiers, human battles. The council members watched in silence as scenes of warfare played out before them. They are not the strongest species we have encountered, Kethmore explained. They are not the smartest. Their technology is primitive by our standards. But they have one characteristic that sets them apart from every other species we have studied. Which is? Vexran asked. They do not surrender. Even when facing impossible odds, even when their defeat is certain, they continue fighting until they are dead. Our analysis of their history shows hundreds of examples of humans fighting to the last individual rather than accept defeat. The UI chamber fell silent again. In galactic civilization, surrender was normal. When faced with superior force, intelligent species negotiated. They found ways to coexist. They survived by adapting. These humans seem to have a different approach to survival. There is more, Kethmore continued. They do not just fight external enemies. They fight each other with the same intensity. They have divided their own species into competing groups and wage war constantly. Yet instead of destroying themselves, they seem to grow stronger from the conflict. Ambassador Zexhai was no longer laughing. You are suggesting that primitives destroyed the Corvathian Empire? I am suggesting that we do not understand what we are looking at, Kethmore replied. The Corvathians were not cowards. If they sent this warning, they had good reason. The council debated for hours. Some members wanted to ignore Sector 7 completely. Others argued for a military expedition. In the end, they reached a compromise. We will send a scientific survey mission, announced the council speaker, her ancient voice carrying final authority. One ship, with representatives from multiple species. They will observe these humans from a safe distance and determine if they pose any threat to galactic peace. As the council session ended, Dr. Kethmore gathered his data and prepared to leave. But one piece of information troubled him more than the others. In all his studies of human warfare, he had noticed something that made no sense. The humans seemed to fight harder when they were losing. Most species fought hardest when they thought they could win. Humans appeared to do the opposite. The more hopeless their situation became, the more dangerous they seemed to become. Dr. Kethmore had studied thousands of species across the galaxy. He had seen every form of life imaginable, but he had never encountered a species that treated certain defeat as a reason to fight harder. As he walked through the corridors of the council station, he wondered if they were making a terrible mistake. The Corvathian warning echoed in his mind. They don't fight like us, they don't think like us. Perhaps that was exactly what made them so dangerous. The survey ship Peaceful Dawn dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Sector 7. Captain Veltar stood on the bridge, watching the view screen display their destination. After 3 weeks of travel, they had finally reached the system that had once terrified the mighty Corvathian Empire. It looked disappointingly normal. Initial scans show nothing unusual, reported Science Officer Trellock from his station. The young Zalaxian had volunteered for this mission despite his family's concerns. Like most of his species, he believed that knowledge was worth any risk. Run. Deep scans of all planets, Captain Veltar ordered. I want to know everything about this system before we approach the third planet. The ship's advanced sensors swept through the system, analyzing each world in detail. The first 2 planets were dead rocks. The fourth was a gas giant with several moons. Nothing suggested the power that had supposedly destroyed the Corvathians. Captain, called Navigator Yexla from her position at the front of the bridge. We are receiving primitive radio transmissions from the third planet. Multiple languages, multiple sources. These humans appear to be divided into hundreds of separate groups. Dr. Kethmore, who had insisted on joining the mission personally, studied the incoming data. This is consistent with our previous analysis. They organize themselves into competing nations rather than a single planetary government. How inefficient, muttered Engineer Pexton. His species had achieved unity before they had even developed space travel. The idea of a divided world seemed wasteful to him. Captain Veltar ordered the ship to take position in the outer system, far enough away to avoid detection, but close enough for detailed observations. For the next several days, they watched and learned. The humans were indeed primitive by galactic standards. Their fastest ships barely reached their own moon. Their weapons, while destructive, were simple chemical and nuclear devices. Their cities were crowded and inefficient. But the more they watched, the more disturbing their observations became. "Captain," Dr. Kethmore said during their morning briefing, "I need to show you something." The main screen displayed a series of human conflicts from their recent history. The images were difficult to watch even for experienced space travelers who had seen many forms of warfare. "This is what they call their Second World War," Kethmore explained. "It lasted 6 of their years and involved nearly their entire species. Watch what happens when their armies face impossible odds." The screen showed human soldiers charging into enemy fire even when their defeat was certain. It showed cities that continued fighting even when surrounded and starving. It showed individuals who chose death rather than surrender. "This makes no tactical sense," observed Commander Zexelin, the ship's military officer. "Any rational species would negotiate when facing superior force." "That's exactly the problem," Dr. Kethmore replied. "These humans do not appear to be entirely rational, at least not in the way we understand rationality." The screen changed to show more recent conflicts, humans fighting in jungles, in deserts, in frozen mountains. Always the same pattern emerged. When faced with overwhelming odds, humans became more dangerous, not less. "Look at this example," Kethmore continued. "A small group of human soldiers, surrounded by a force 10 times their size. Any civilized species would surrender and negotiate for their lives. Instead, these humans fought until every one of them was dead. They killed more enemies in their final battle than in all their previous engagements combined." Science Officer Traylock leaned forward in his chair. "Perhaps they were protecting something valuable?" "That's what I thought initially," Kethmore said. "But I found hundreds of similar examples. Humans who fought hopeless battles for no clear strategic purpose. They seemed to fight simply because they refused to give up." Captain Veltar had been listening in growing discomfort. His species had evolved as prey animals on their homeworld. Survival meant knowing when to run, when to hide, when to submit to superior force. The idea of fighting a hopeless battle was alien to him. "Show me their current military situation," he ordered. The display changed to show real-time observations of human military forces. Even now, in what appeared to be a time of relative peace, humans continued preparing for war. Every nation maintained armies. Every government stockpiled weapons. They spent enormous amounts of their resources on warfare, Dr. Kethmore noted. Even their peaceful nations maintain the capability to destroy entire cities. It's as if they expect to fight for their existence at any moment. "Perhaps they're preparing for external threats," suggested Navigator Yexla. "No," Kethmore replied. "All their preparations are focused on fighting each other. They have divided their own world into armed camps ready for war at any moment." Engineer Pexton shook his head in disbelief. "How have they survived this long? Any species that fights constantly should have destroyed itself ages ago." Dr. Kethmore touched his control pad, bringing up new data. "That's the most disturbing part. They don't just survive their constant warfare, they seem to grow stronger from it." The screen showed human technological development over time. Each major war was followed by rapid advances in science, medicine, and engineering. The humans appeared to innovate fastest when they were trying to kill each other. "This is unprecedented in our studies of galactic civilization," Kethmore continued. "Most species achieve peace before they develop advanced technology. These humans have done the opposite. They have used conflict to drive their development." Captain Veltar studied the data with growing unease. "What is their current population?" "Over 7 billion individuals," Kethmore replied. "And growing rapidly despite their constant conflicts." The bridge fell silent. 7 billion was a massive population for a single planet. Most civilized worlds never exceeded 1 billion individuals before expanding to other planets. "Sir," communications officer Nexra spoke up from her station, "I've been analyzing their entertainment broadcasts. Even their stories and games focus on conflict and warfare. They appear to find violence entertaining." Commander Zexlin's 4 eyes widened in shock. "They enjoy warfare?" "Their most popular stories involve individuals fighting against impossible odds," Nexra continued. "They celebrate characters who refuse to surrender even when facing certain death. They seem to admire what we would consider suicidal behavior." Captain Veltar walked to the view screen, staring at the small blue planet in the distance. Somewhere down there, 7 billion humans went about their daily lives, apparently ready for war at any moment. "Dr. Kethmore," he said, "in your professional opinion, do these humans pose a threat to galactic civilization?" The scientist was quiet for a long moment. "Captain, I have studied warfare across thousands of species. I have seen every form of military organization in the galaxy, but I have never encountered a species where the entire population appears to be permanently organized for warfare. That doesn't answer my question. Then let me be direct. If these humans ever develop interstellar technology, they will be unlike any species we have ever encountered. They do not think like us. They do not fight like us. And if the Corvathian warning was accurate, they do not lose like us either." Captain Veltar made his decision. "Continue observations for another week, then we return to the council with our report." But privately he was beginning to understand why the Corvathians had been afraid. It wasn't the humans' technology that made them dangerous. It was something much more fundamental. These humans seemed to have no concept of acceptable defeat. Science Officer Trellock stared at the human space station through the observation deck windows. After 2 weeks of watching from a distance, he had convinced Captain Veltar to make peaceful contact. The station was primitive by galactic standards, but it represented humanity's greatest achievement in space. "All weapons are powered down," reported Commander Zexlin. "We are broadcasting universal peace symbols on all frequencies." The peaceful dawn approached slowly, its hull displaying holographic images of friendship and scientific cooperation. These symbols had worked with every other species the galaxy had ever encountered. "Captain," communications officer Nexera called out, "we're receiving a response." The main screen flickered to life, showing a human face for the first time. The creature looked surprisingly similar to several known species, though its skin was pale and it had only 2 eyes. Most striking were the thin lips that curved upward in what their cultural database identified as a smile. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the International Space Station," the human said in clear, measured tones. "Welcome to Earth's solar system. We have been hoping for this day for a very long time." Captain Veltar stepped forward, his relief evident. After all the disturbing observations, the humans seemed remarkably civilized in person. "Greetings, Commander Chen. I am Captain Veltar of the Galactic Survey Corps. We come in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship between our peoples." The next few hours passed better than anyone had expected. Commander Chen was intelligent, curious, and eager to learn about galactic civilization. She arranged for the alien visitors to dock with the space station and meet face to face. Dr. Kethmore was fascinated by the humans he encountered. They were curious about everything, asking detailed questions about other species, about galactic politics, about technology. They seemed genuinely excited about joining the larger community of intelligent life. "Your species appears remarkably adaptable," Dr. Kethmore told Commander Chen as they toured the station. "Most civilizations are much more cautious during first contact." Commander Chen laughed, a sound that several of the aliens found oddly musical. "Humans have always been explorers. We're natural risk-takers. The people who built this station were willing to strap themselves to controlled explosions just to see what was out there." Science Officer Trellock found this comment disturbing, but he kept his concerns to himself. He was busy taking notes on human behavior, trying to understand what made them so different from other species. The cultural exchange continued for hours. The humans showed their guests around the station, explained their primitive but ingenious technology, and shared their hopes for the future. Everything seemed to be going perfectly. Then Trelloc made his mistake. During a discussion about galactic civilization, he mentioned how different species contributed to the greater community. He talked about trade, about cultural exchange, about the peaceful resolution of conflicts between worlds. Of course, some species contribute more than others, Trelloc said casually. The more advanced civilizations naturally take leadership roles. Less developed species often serve as honored servants to their betters. It's a system that has worked well for thousands of years. The change in the humans was immediate and unmistakable. Commander Chen's smile disappeared. Her posture stiffened. Around the station, other humans stopped their conversations and turned to listen. "Honored servants?" Chen asked, her voice carefully controlled. "Yes," Trelloc continued, not recognizing the danger. "For example, my species discovered the Keltari about 300 years ago. They were primitive, violent, constantly fighting among themselves. We brought them peace and purpose. Now they serve in our households and are much happier than they were in their natural state." Dr. Kethmore noticed the change in the humans' behavior and tried to intervene. What Science Officer Trelloc means is that different species find different roles in galactic society. But the damage was done. Commander Chen looked directly at Trelloc with an expression that made the young scientist step backward. "You enslaved them," she said. It was not a question. "Enslaved is such an ugly word," Trelloc replied, confused by the human's reaction. "We prefer to think of it as providing guidance and structure to species that need direction." The silence that followed was more frightening than any weapon. Every human on the station had stopped what they were doing. They stood perfectly still, watching the alien visitors with an intensity that made Captain Veltar's survival instincts scream warnings. "I think there has been a misunderstanding," Dr. Kethmore said quickly. "Perhaps we should discuss this later, when—" "No misunderstanding," Commander Chen interrupted. Her voice was quiet, but it carried absolute authority. "You practice slavery. You think it's normal. You came here expecting to do the same to us." "Not at all," Captain Veltar said, finally understanding that something had gone terribly wrong. "We simply came to observe and learn. We have no intention of—" "Get off our station." The words were spoken quietly, but every alien on the station heard them clearly. Commander Chen had not raised her voice, but something in her tone made it clear that this was not a request. "Commander Chen, surely we can discuss this reasonably." Captain Veltar tried again. Chen turned to look at him directly. What he saw in her eyes made him understand for the first time why the Corvathians had been afraid. "You have 30 minutes to return to your ship and leave our solar system," Chen said. "After that, we will consider your presence an act of hostility." "You cannot threaten us," Science Officer Trelloc said, his scientific curiosity overriding his common sense. "Your technology is centuries behind ours. You have no weapons that could threaten our ship." Commander Chen smiled again, but this smile was nothing like her earlier expression of welcome. This smile was cold and sharp and promised terrible things. 30 minutes, she repeated. The aliens were escorted back to their ship quickly but politely. The humans said nothing more, but their message was clear. As the peaceful dawn undocked from the space station, Captain Veltar tried to make sense of what had happened. "They cannot seriously expect us to leave," Commander Zexlin said. "This is their first contact with galactic civilization. They need us more than we need them." Captain Veltar was not so sure. Something about the human's reaction had triggered every survival instinct his species possessed, but his scientific curiosity and his pride as a starship captain overruled his caution. "We will establish a research station on their moon," he decided. "Once they understand the benefits of galactic citizenship, they will be more reasonable." Dr. Kethmore studied the sensor readings from the space station. Something was happening down there. The humans were moving with purpose, communicating rapidly, activating systems that had been dormant. "Captain," he said carefully, "perhaps we should consider returning to the Council. We can always come back with a larger diplomatic mission." "Absolutely not," Veltar replied. "We will not be frightened away by primitives who barely understand nuclear fusion. Begin preparations for lunar landing. As the ship moved toward Earth's moon, none of the aliens noticed the small objects launching from the planet below. The objects were too small to be missiles, too slow to be weapons. They appeared to be primitive spacecraft probably launched in panic. By the time Captain Veltar realized what was happening, it was too late. The humans had not panicked. They had prepared, and as Dr. Kethmore watched the sensor readings in growing horror, he finally understood what the Korvathian warning had really meant. These humans did not think like other species. When faced with a superior enemy, they did not negotiate or submit or run away. They got ready to fight. Captain Veltar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. 48 hours ago, the humans had barely possessed chemical rockets. Now his sensors showed dozens of spacecraft approaching from multiple directions, moving faster than anything humans should have been able to build. "How is this possible?" Commander Zexlin demanded from his position at the weapons station. "They cannot have developed this technology so quickly." Dr. Kethmore was hunched over his scanner, his tentacles moving rapidly as he analyzed the incoming data. "They didn't develop it," he said, his voice tight with concern. "They stole it." "Stole what?" Captain Veltar asked. "Our technology. When we docked with their space station, they must have scanned our ship. Somehow they've reverse-engineered our propulsion systems and built their own versions." The main screen showed the approaching human vessels. They were ugly, asymmetrical, things that looked like they had been assembled in great haste. Sections of human spacecraft had been welded together with alien components. It should not have worked, but it did work. The ships were accelerating at rates that should have crushed their crews, yet they kept coming. "Their engineering makes no sense," Engineer Pexton muttered from his station. "Those ships should tear themselves apart. The structural stress alone should—" His words were cut off as the first human vessel exploded in a brilliant flash of light. "Direct hit," Commander Zexlin reported. "One enemy ship destroyed." But Captain Veltar was watching something that made no sense. Instead of retreating after losing one of their own, the human ships were accelerating toward the peaceful dawn. "They're not running," he said. Dr. Kethmore looked up from his sensors. "Sir, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the approaching vessels. They appear to be overloading their reactor cores." "Overloading? That would destroy their ships." "Yes, sir, it would." The tactical display showed more human vessels approaching. Some were clearly damaged from their hasty construction. Others were trailing atmosphere, indicating hull breaches. None of them were slowing down. A communication came through on the emergency frequency. The voice was human, calm, and professional. "Alien vessel, this is Colonel Jackson of the United Earth Defense Force. You have 60 seconds to surrender or die. We don't take slaves and we don't make exceptions." "Captain," Veltar laughed despite his growing concern. "Surrender? To primitives in ships held together with metal tape? Open communications." The main screen showed a human face. Unlike Commander Chen, this human wore what was clearly military attire. His expression was coldly professional. "This is Captain Veltar of the Galactic Survey Corps," Veltar said. "You are attacking a diplomatic vessel. This is an act of war against the entire galactic community." Colonel Jackson's expression didn't change. "You came to our planet talking about slavery. You refused to leave when ordered. In our culture, that makes you slavers and invaders. We have a simple policy regarding both." "Your culture is irrelevant," Captain Veltar replied. "You are primitives. Your ships are toys. Your weapons cannot penetrate our shields." For the first time, the human smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. 45 seconds, Jackson said, then cut the transmission. "Sir," Dr. Kethmore called out, "the approaching vessels are not slowing down. They're going to ram us." "Our shields will protect us," Commander Zexlin said confidently. "Their primitive ships will be destroyed on contact." The first human vessel struck the peaceful Dawn's shields at full speed. The explosion lit up space like a small star. The alien ship's shields held, but the energy readings were concerning. "Shields down to 80%, reported Engineer Pexton. That ship was carrying enough explosives to destroy a small city. More human ships were approaching. "Captain," Veltar realized with growing alarm that they were all on collision courses. "They're all going to ram us," he said. Impossible, Commander Zexlin replied. No rational species sacrifices its own ships in hopeless attacks. The second human vessel struck the shields with even more force than the first. The explosion shook the entire alien ship. Shields down to 50%, Pexton reported. Captain, these humans are using their own ships as guided missiles. On the tactical display, more human vessels were approaching. Some were larger, clearly cargo ships that had been hastily converted. Others were so small they could only hold 1 or 2 crew members. All of them were aimed directly at the peaceful dawn. This is insane, Veltar muttered. They're killing themselves for no strategic purpose. Dr. Kethmore was monitoring communications from the human ships. What he heard chilled him to his core. Captain, you need to listen to this. The bridge speakers crackled with human voices. Pilots saying goodbye to their families, crews joking with each other as they prepared to die. One voice stood out above the others. This is Flight Leader Martinez. Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for every species these bastards have enslaved. Make it count. The third impact nearly overloaded the ship's shields entirely. Shields down to 20%, Engineer Pexton reported. One more hit like that and they'll collapse completely. Captain Veltar stared at the tactical display. More than 30 human vessels were still approaching. Even if his shields held against a few more impacts, there were too many of them. How many crew members are on those ships, he asked. Dr. Kethmore checked his sensors. Approximately 300 humans total. 300 individuals throwing their lives away in suicide attacks against a ship they could never hope to defeat in conventional warfare. It made no tactical sense, but it was working. Sir, Commander Zexlin said quietly, perhaps we should consider retreating. The fourth human ship exploded against their shields. This one had been larger, a converted cargo vessel packed with enough explosives to level a mountain. The peaceful dawn shuddered under the impact. Shields failing, Pexton reported. Next, impact will breach the hull. Captain Veltar looked at the approaching human vessels. They were close enough now that he could see details of their construction. Crude welding, mismatched components, ships that should have fallen apart before they reached space. But they hadn't fallen apart. The humans had made them work through sheer determination. Get us out of here, he ordered. Sir, Commander Zexlin asked. Full retreat. Now, the peaceful. Dawn turned and accelerated away from Earth as fast as its engines could manage. Behind them, the remaining human vessels continued pursuit for several minutes before giving up the chase. As they fled toward the outer edge of the solar system, Captain Veltar tried to make sense of what had happened. They had been defeated by primitives using technology they had learned only 2 days earlier. Dr. Kethmore, he said, in your professional opinion, what just happened? The xenobiologist was quiet for a long moment. We encountered a species that fights differently than we do, he finally said. When we face superior force, we surrender and negotiate for the best possible terms. When humans face superior force, they find ways to make the cost of victory too high to pay. 300 individuals died in those attacks. Yes, sir. And they accomplished their objective. We're leaving. Captain Veltar stared at the view screen showing the small blue planet behind them. Set course for the nearest council station. Priority 1 transmission. What should the message say? Asked Communications Officer Nexra. Captain Veltar thought about the Corvathian warning, about the fear in that ancient voice. Now he understood what had happened to the galaxy's most powerful empire. Tell them we found the humans. Tell them the Corvathians were right. And tell them, he paused, still trying to process what he had witnessed. Tell them that some species don't fight to win. They fight to make sure you lose. Behind them, Earth continued its orbit around its small yellow star. But Captain Veltar knew this would not be the end of the story. The humans had tasted alien technology. They had proven they could adapt it to their needs almost instantly. And they had shown that they were willing to pay any price to protect their independence. The galaxy was about to meet a species unlike any other. A species that viewed overwhelming odds not as a reason to surrender, but as motivation to fight harder. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours of receiving Captain Veltar's report. Representatives from across the galaxy filled the great chamber, their voices creating a buzz of concern and disbelief. Ambassador Zexhai stood at the central podium, no longer the confident diplomat who had dismissed the Corvathian warning weeks earlier. His forearms trembled slightly as he read the survey mission's findings to the assembled council. The human species demonstrated the ability to reverse engineer our technology and deploy it operationally within 48 hours, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. They showed no hesitation in sacrificing their own lives to achieve tactical objectives. Most disturbing, they appear to view overwhelming odds as motivation rather than deterrent. Councillor Vexran of the hegemony leaned forward in his seat. His species had built their civilization on strength and conquest, but even they understood the concept of acceptable losses. How many of their vessels did our ship destroy? He asked. 7 confirmed kills, Zexhai replied, but the humans continued their attacks until our vessel retreated. They showed no concern for casualties. The chamber erupted in discussion. Representatives whispered to their aides, checked their data pads, and tried to process what they were. Hearing Dr. Kethmore stepped forward to address the council. His tentacles swayed nervously as he spoke. Honorable representatives, I have studied warfare across thousands of species. I have analyzed every form of military organization known to galactic civilization. What we encountered at Earth represents something entirely new. He activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber. Images of human warfare filled the space above the council floor. Most species fight to achieve specific objectives, Kethmore continued. They seek to gain territory, resources, or political advantage. They calculate costs and benefits. They know when to surrender to preserve what they can. The display showed scenes from human history. Soldiers fighting in impossible conditions. Cities refusing to surrender even when surrounded. Individuals choosing death rather than defeat. Humans appear to fight for different reasons. They fight to avoid subjugation. They fight to protect their independence. And when those things are threatened, they will pay any price to defend them. Councillor Nexta, whose species had once been enslaved by the Corvathians, spoke from her position at the far end of the chamber. Dr. Kethmore, are you suggesting that humans cannot be reasoned with? That diplomatic solutions are impossible? Not at all, Kethmore replied. The humans were initially friendly and cooperative. The conflict began only when they learned about our use of servant species. They appear to have a cultural prohibition against slavery that overrides all other considerations. The chamber fell, quiet. Many of the species represented in the council used some form of indentured servitude. It was considered a normal part of galactic civilization. They object to our labor practices? Asked Representative Gexmar of the Trade Federation. They do more than object, Zexhai said. They view it as grounds for war. The holographic display changed to show the battle near Earth. The assembled council watched in stunned silence as human ships destroyed themselves in suicide attacks against the superior alien vessel. This footage shows the humans' final assault, Dr. Kethmore explained. Note that they continue attacking even after suffering severe casualties. Their tactical communications indicate they viewed this not as a hopeless battle, but as an acceptable exchange. Acceptable exchange of what? Vexran demanded. Their lives for our retreat, Kethmore replied simply. The implications of those words settled over the chamber like a dark cloud. Every representative understood what they were hearing. These humans had been willing to die simply to make the aliens go away. We need to understand the historical context, Dr. Kethmore continued. Human civilization has faced multiple extinction events. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, global pandemics. Each time they not only survived but emerged stronger. They appear to have evolved psychological mechanisms that help them function under extreme threat. The display showed more scenes from human history, cities rebuilt after destruction, populations recovering from disasters. Always the same pattern of survival and adaptation. Most concerning is their rate of technological development, Kethmore added. They went from primitive chemical rockets to functional copies of our propulsion systems in less than 2 days. If they achieve interstellar capability— He didn't finish the sentence, he didn't need to. The council speaker, ancient even by the standards of her long-lived species, rose from her ceremonial seat. Her voice carried the weight of 10,000 years of galactic governance. "What do you recommend?" Dr. Kethmore looked around the chamber at the hundreds of representatives. Each species present had achieved galactic citizenship through cooperation, diplomacy, and peaceful integration. The humans appeared to offer a different path. "Based on our observations, I believe humans will develop interstellar technology within the next 50 to 100 years," he said. "When they do, they will encounter other species. Some of those species practice forms of servitude that humans consider unacceptable. And then," the council speaker asked, "then we will have a species in the galaxy that fights wars of liberation." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Wars of liberation meant conflicts that could not be resolved through negotiation. They meant a species that would fight not for territory or resources, but for principles. Representative Texelos of the Mining Consortium stood to address the chamber. "Surely you're being overly dramatic. One primitive species cannot threaten galactic civilization." Dr. Kethmore activated another display. This one showed population figures, industrial capacity, and military production rates for Earth. "The human homeworld has a population of over 7 billion individuals," he said. "Their industrial base, while primitive, is massive. Most importantly, their entire civilization appears to be organized around the concept of total warfare." "Explain," demanded the council speaker. "Every human nation maintains military forces. Every human settlement can be converted to weapons production if necessary. Their entertainment, their education, their cultural values all emphasize individual sacrifice for collective survival. They are not a military with a civilization attached. They are a civilization that has militarized itself." The chamber erupted in nervous discussion. The implications were staggering. If humans achieved interstellar capability, they would not arrive as explorers or traders or diplomats. They would arrive as liberators. Ambassador Zexhai called for order. When the chamber quieted, he presented the council's recommendation. "We propose Resolution 2847, he announced. "Sector 7 is hereby declared a quarantine zone. No contact with the human species is authorized. All vessels are to maintain a minimum distance of 50 light-years. Any civilization that ignores this warning does so at their own risk." The vote was unanimous. As the council session ended, representatives filed out of the chamber in worried groups. Many were already making plans to restructure their labor systems. Others were calculating the distance between Earth and their own worlds. Dr. Kethmore remained behind, staring at the holographic display still showing Earth. The small blue planet looked peaceful from space, giving no hint of the dangerous species it harbored. "Dr. Kethmore," the council speaker approached him, her ancient voice heavy with concern. "In your professional opinion, will the quarantine contain them?" The xenobiologist considered the question carefully. He thought about human history, about their relentless expansion across their own planet, about their dreams of reaching the stars. "No," he said finally. "The quarantine will simply give them time to prepare." As if to confirm his words, the display's long-range sensors detected new activity in the Earth system. Massive construction projects had begun on the human moon. Industrial facilities were being established on nearby asteroids. The humans were building infrastructure for space-based civilization. "How long do we have?" the council speaker asked. Dr. Kethmore studied the sensor readings. "Based on their rate of technological development and their industrial capacity, I estimate 50 years before they achieve independent interstellar capability." And then, the old scientist looked at the peaceful blue planet one more time. "Then the galaxy learns what the Corvathians discovered 10,000 years ago, which is that some species don't negotiate, they don't compromise, they don't surrender. When they find something they consider wrong, they fix it, permanently." As Dr. Kethmore left the chamber, the display continued showing Earth. The quarantine zone was already being established, with warning beacons placed at its borders. Ships from across the galaxy were changing course to avoid Sector 7. But on the surface of the small blue planet, 7 billion humans continued their daily lives. unaware that they had been declared the most dangerous species in the galaxy. They were too busy building starships to notice.